Jenny, it's time for Under 30. Market off the lows a little bit. Russell holding on to green territory. Still a mixed day. A little bit over 2 hours to the close. Deb, let's talk some Snap.
Snap might be one of our brightest spots of our whole show, up 4.5% on the day, which is something we can't really say for several of the other names. And Snap deserves, I'd say, an up day, falling about 20.5% year to date. But it's up 6% this week, 2 hours into the close. We'll see if things can hold for Snap, as things look pretty positive for them this week. Now, Piper Sandler reiterated Snap as overweight, saying it sees compelling user growth opportunities for this company, which, again, it's due because its user growth or its daily active users have been a very weak spot for the company. But to tell us more on Snap and all things really the social media space is George Tillis, TD Ameritrade Network contributor. So George, I have to admit, I've never had Snapchat. I never thought it was like something I needed in my life. I'm trying to limit my social media exposure, and I'm not sure if Alex has it. I don't know. You don't? Okay, so George, do you have Snapchat?
You know me, I'm the social media butterfly. Yeah, absolutely not. No, I don't have Snapchat.
I figured you didn't, but from at least a trading or fundamental perspective, what's going on with Snap? How can they recover what has been a brutal couple of months?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's a very interesting situation. One of the things you got to keep in mind with Snapchat is that it faced a lot of what's going on with Facebook in terms of the privacy changes to the iOS and even Google Android that has been put in place by Google and Apple against companies like Facebook and Snapchat. I mean, advertising-based metrics are difficult now to track and monetize users based upon the changes that the duopoly has made. That duopoly is Google and Apple. But here's the thing. I think there was a guilt by association. If you look at Facebook, when it reported earnings on the 4th, Snapchat and Pinterest also fell sequentially, commensurate to what was going on with Facebook. So in other words, you know, Snapchat went from like $34 to $24, and the next day it rebounded to $40. It was an immense, what they call gap and trap to the downside and reversal, based on the fact that Snapchat the next day actually reported some user growth that was actually pretty compelling. The total numbers when it comes down to user engagement increased 20% on a year-over-year basis to close to 320 million. At the same time, total sales increased 64%. So when you see sales increase 3 times the user growth engagement numbers, it gives you an idea that the monetizable active users increasing. That's what you want to see with Snapchat, especially with a company that is not on a net or a GAAP basis profitable, but it is on a non-GAAP basis profitable. This is a company that is moving today also, is actually trading well in the past couple of months, despite being down year to date, alongside with the rest of the market and, of course, the NASDAQ, there's a compelling story behind the growth going forward. Now, today, the reason the stock is higher, and this is probably pretty meaningful, is Piper Sandler came out with a report. They've got an overweight rating and a stock price of $53. They actually see at least, now, if you think of the numbers I reported, 319 daily active users, they see up to 800 million users, which is about 12% compound annual for the next 5 years. That's just for the top 15 countries by GDP in the world. They actually are very aggressive, very optimistic to the potential of about 1.7 billion users eventually in total going forward. Look at Facebook. Their user growth has peaked, but the profitability is also peaked, because if you look at gross margins for Facebook, it's over 80%, whereas Snapchat has only about 55%. And if you look at net profits, negative 15% for Snapchat, but positive 42% for Facebook. So in other words, there's only room to run to the upside, and only room for improvement for a company like Snapchat relative to Facebook, which I think is struggling. And particularly, it's being targeted by the other two monopolies, Google and Apple.
George, I love you described the kind of phenomenon that we saw post-Facebook earnings, pre-Snap, where it was as if there's literally nothing Snap can say that's good. And that's the phenomenon of that pendulum of sentiment swinging so negative that literally anything is positive. And then it was actually positive, and you see this, it's almost like this ball that's been held underwater just explode higher. This soda can that's been shaken up and explodes. And I don't think there's much more to add to that. It's just a really important phenomenon. But Snap is not alone. I mean, even names like Meta that are massive, their charts just paint this picture of destruction despite this nice bounce that we've seen. Yet you look at the market, you don't see the same picture. And so, George, my question to you is a little bit more macro. And as we tie things up, just a quick, 30-second thought. What if Apple looks like Snapchat? What does that mean for the market?
Well, you got to consider two different platforms. You have to think about Facebook and Snapchat. These two companies, and Pinterest as well, anything that uses some sort of mobile app relies on Apple and Google. So I think out of the FANGs, Facebook is the biggest challenged company. If you look at Snapchat, I think the overall penetration in the United States is probably saturated, nearly full. But there's so much room to grow globally because they haven't nearly the level of penetration globally that Facebook does. So if you're looking for growth in the social media space, the best potential, Snapchat's the one. Again, Facebook is more of a value-orientated company. It's got a very high profit margin. In fact, one of the largest profit margins in the FANG space. But you have to think about the challenges that company faces going forward. Its user growth is actually in decline, not increasing. So that's where the disparity is between the two companies. Snapchat certainly has more room to run. But at the same time, you have to think about the nature of Facebook being, again, the most ubiquitous social media platform globally as well.
George, sometimes I also just have to wonder if Snap isn't cool anymore. If that everyone's on TikTok, everyone's on Instagram, it's just not garnering the same kind of attention. As we know, social media, people are very picky. I mean, what is MySpace now? It just goes to show that trends change and they change very rapidly. But George, thank you as always for your insight.